Hello, this is Catherine from Accelerated Reader Reading Books for You. Today I will be reading Chapter 4 from The Moon and the Magic Box by Michael Ross, illustrated by Magdalena Adic. Before I begin reading, I would like to give a big thanks to the author for sending me this book to read on my channel. In the description below, I've included links where you may find and purchase this book. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chapter 4 The Magic Box. Troy gently drifted back onto the forest floor, and so did the box. The box stopped flashing. The eyes inside the box disappeared. It also stopped moving in and out as if it was breathing. Desmi, while keeping an eye of the box, ran over to Troy, who already seemed to be coming around. "Troy! Troy, are you okay?" a concerned Desmi shouted. At the same time, Nesbit had jumped over, had both his paws on Troy's chest, and was vigorously licking his face. Troy opened his eyes and looked a little confused, but suddenly remembered where he was. He pushed Nesbit away with a, Okay, Nezzy, let me get back up." With Desmi's help, he stood up. He looked a little shaky, so Desmi held onto his arms for a few moments until he fully recovered. Desmi put her arms around Troy and gave him a big hug and said, "I was so worried." "Hey, I'm fine, Desmi," said Troy, giving Desmi one of his crooked smiles. "But my head feels like it's going to explode. Not a headache, like it's full of stuff. What the hell happened?" Then he remembered the box. He looked around, and there it was. Luckily, there were still some little fires around, providing some warm light, and with the help of the torchlight on Desmi's phone, the box was there on the ground around 5 feet away from them. They started to make their way over to the box. Nesbit sat where he was with a look on his face that said, "Here we go again." "That's funny," said Desmi. "I could have sworn I could see through the box. There was something inside. It had large eyes, but they were friendly, and I'm sure it was pointing at you." Well, there's nothing for it. Let's have another look," said Troy. "Should we be doing that, Troy? Look what it did to you," Desmi said. "Yes, but apart from a stuffy head, I'm okay. And you're okay, and Nesbit's." Troy turned to look at Nesbit, who was now standing by his side, panting and wagging his tail. "He's just fine." And with that, Troy again inched forward. He didn't have the stick anymore, but on closer inspection of the box, the lightning flashes had slowed down until they were hardly swirling around. There was a movement. It looked like the swirling flashes were breathing in and out. You could still see through it. He reached forward and put his hand out to touch it. It looked like he could put his hand straight through the middle of it, but there was some sort of invisible barrier. The texture of the box was smooth. It looked and felt like thick glass, but it wasn't. There was no sheen to it, as if there shouldn't be anything there at all. But there was. It was by far the strangest thing Troy had ever come across. It felt lukewarm. He moved forward a little and maneuvered himself to get into a position to try to lift it, expecting it to be heavy, but it was light as a feather. It took him by surprise, so much so he almost threw it into the air. He moved it around in his arms, looking for some indication that there was something inside, or maybe a chink in its surface, so he could see inside. But there was nothing at all. "Okay," said Troy, "let's take it back to my place, and we will try to figure out what it is and what it all means." Troy turned to Desmi and suggested she phoned her dad to say she was staying over at Troy's. During school time, she did spend some nights at Troy's. They were in the same class at school, so they were able to help each other with homework or other school projects. The farmhouse was quite a large one, having 6 bedrooms, and because they were all so close, Desmi even had her own bedroom, 1 floor down from Troy's, for times she needed to stay over. It didn't take them long to get back to the farm. As they came to the large stable door at the back of the farmhouse, the top half of the door was open, as it usually was in summer because it was so warm. Troy poked his head in and looked around. Good, no sign of his mom. On the Aga cooker, he could hear something gently bubbling away. He sniffed the air. His favorite, beef and dumpling stew. He could even smell some freshly baked bread his mom would have made to accompany the stew. Troy gave Desmi a nod of his head, and she gently opened the door, and they crept in. Even Nesbit seemed to understand that they were being cautious, so crept in behind them. Desmi closed the bottom half of the door quietly, and they began to make their way to the stairs, which were just through the kitchen. They had only traveled halfway through the kitchen when Troy heard his mom shout to him, "Troy, is that you, dear? Food is ready. Is Desmi with you?" They froze. Troy gulped. "Yes, Mom, we are back now. Had a great time. Stars were amazing, and yes, Desmi's here. Just going to clean up, then we'll be right down." "Okay, love, no rush. See you in a min." Troy's mom was an avid artist in her own right, mainly watercolors. In fact, she was so good she regularly had viewings at the farmhouse. Her paintings went for quite high prices. There was talk of putting a collection together and putting them up for auction at nearby Boscastle, a beautiful little seaside hamlet a little further down from them on the west Cornish coast. They were mainly landscapes with the odd portrait of Troy and Nesbit, other relatives that visited every so often, and of course, quite a few of Troy's father. These she would never sell. For her inspiration, she dug out the collection of photos with him featured in them, and used those to paint. It was very therapeutic for her, kept her memory of him alive. Troy would notice sometimes when they were alone that she appeared to be having a little word with one of the paintings of him up on the walls. She would notice Troy and pretend to be in the middle of doing chores, and would nip past him, but on more than one occasion he noticed she was upset. So he would shoot after her, pull her close, and gave her a big hug. They both loved that. Then she would pull away, ruffle his hair, and say, "Oh, my darling, you are my favorite son in the whole wide world." Troy would start smiling his cricket smile and say, "But Mum, I'm your only son." And they would laugh out loud. Moments like this were precious for both of them. It told them that if they had each other, things would be just fine. They didn't know this, of course, but this special bond they had was going to be tested very soon. As Troy made his way through the kitchen, he knew she would be painting. From the bottom of the stairs leading up to the bedrooms, Troy craned his neck around the wall and could just see a reflection of his mom in the conservatory, which was her art studio. Desmee, Troy, and Nesbit made their way up the stairs as quickly as they could. Troy was being as careful as he could to make sure he hadn't banged or scraped the box on the walls. He couldn't wait to examine it, but first things first. Take the box to his room, carefully hide it somewhere, and then down to the kitchen to eat and see his mom. The last thing he wanted to do at this stage was arouse any suspicions from his mom. He had never lied to his mom, and so he always believed it was okay to keep little secrets to himself. That way she wouldn't ask, and so he wouldn't have to lie. This logic had worked well for him, so far anyway. Glynis didn't often go into Troy's bedroom. She respected his privacy. If he was in, she always knocked on the bedroom door first. If he wasn't, it would only be to place some freshly washed and pressed clothes onto his bed. Troy was very organized and tidy for a young man of his age. He insisted he was old enough to put his clothes away himself. He believed it was one of the many ways he could think of to help his mom. When Troy went into his bedroom, he went straight to his walk-in wardrobe and gently placed the box just inside. He covered it with a clean dust sheet he was going to use when he finally got around to decorating the inside of his bedroom window. Right, let's go and eat, Desmee. We don't want to make Mom wonder what we've been up to. We can come up right after and have a good look at this thing. With that, they started to make their way downstairs. For a moment or two, Nesbit stood at the top of the stairs and sniffed the air. Yep, stew was his favorite as well, and started padding down the stairs at breakneck speed, squeezing past Desmee and Troy, almost knocking them over. By now, Glynis was in the kitchen and had ladled out the steaming suet dumplings and beef stew into large earthenware bowls, and was now cutting huge chunks of the freshly baked granary bread she had baked. So, was it fun out there tonight, you two? Then she noticed Nesbit in begging mode, standing in front of the aga, staring at the pan containing the stew and wagging his tail vigorously. I meant you three, continued Glynis. They all laughed at this remark. Yeah, Mom, it was Brill. Sky was so clear, stars were so bright, said Troy, while wolfing down a couple of dumplings. Well, this might sound strange, said Glynis, but around an hour ago I felt the floor vibrate a little. You know, the little brushes in the jar next to my easel? They were tinkling away, and I am sure I saw some sort of glow in the sky pass overhead. I know the conservatory roof needs cleaning, but I'm convinced something passed over. Did you guys notice anything? As Glynis said this, Desmee spluttered on the fresh orange juice she was drinking, and Troy simply stopped eating, then threw a sideways glance at Desmee. Troy said cautiously. Yeah, maybe there was something, but you know what, Mom? Whatever it was, came and went. I suppose it could have been a meteorite. His mom agreed with him. Yes, darling, could well have been. It wouldn't be the first we've had around here. As long as you both are okay. As if on cue, Nesbit padded over to Glynis and laid his head on her lap and looked expectantly into her eyes. Glynis laughed out loud, ruffled his head, got up, collected his bowl of dried food, ladled on some of the meat and rich gravy from their stew, and placed it on his mat near the back door. He looked like he hadn't eaten for years and gobbled it all up in a matter of minutes. Troy was mentally thanking Nesbit for coming over to his mom when he did. It got her mind off what she had thought was a meteorite. He and Desme breathed a mental sigh of relief. They were almost finished now and were about to get up and make their way upstairs when Glynis said, "Whoa, wait a minute, you guys." Troy and Desme froze. "Just wanted to say I'm doing a roast lamb dinner tomorrow, so maybe your dad wants to join us, Desme." Troy and Desme breathed a sigh of relief. "Sure, Mrs. Mount. I will ask him later. I'm sure he will say yes." They smiled at each other. With that, Troy, Desme, and Nesbit started running back upstairs, but not before Glynis shouted up after them to not run, because they could get indigestion. Once back in the room, the door was closed. Nesbit jumped onto Troy's bed, lay down with his head between his paws, watching their every move. You could see he was genuinely interested. His ears were pricked up, listening intently. Troy slid off the cover sheet covering the box. When he did this, Nesbit lifted his head and started to growl. Troy turned around to him, putting his finger to his lips, and hissed, "Shh!" Nesbit accepted his master's command and lay his head down to watch. Troy's room had a lovely airy feeling about it. The walls were painted a light blue. To Troy, he liked space and would say to Desme that the color he had chosen reminded him of the sky. To one side of his door, from the inside looking out, there was a large old-fashioned railway clock, which belonged to his grandfather. It was wound up with a large brass key, and it had a gentle tick-tock to it. There were various posters on his wall, his favorite football team, of course, a red sports car that in his dreams he would have one day, and a canvas photo of the horizon looking from his bedroom window. He had an old oak desk in one corner, which was strewn with pencils, pens, and paper in no particular order. Having said that, it was a very tidy room. Everything was put away where it was supposed to be. Finally, there was a fireplace on the gable end wall. It was a real fireplace, and occasionally in winter he would light a fire and retire to bed with the warm glowing embers of the fire peeking up above the bottom of his bed. He always made sure the fire guard was in place, and it always generated a warm, cozy, welcoming feeling in the room. Troy and Desme were both peering at the box. They started to feel its surface, turning it this way and that, looking for some clue, any clue, as to what it could be. Nope, nothing. They both sat back, wondering what to do next. When Troy felt his head was going to explode, he bent forward, holding his head in his hands. At the same time, the surface of the box seemed to be separating from the main body of the box, and a blue light shot out. This light enveloped Troy, who started to shake, but stood up and stumbled to his desk, grabbed a pen and a large sheet of paper, and started to write. Desme was tentatively looking over his shoulders. He was writing very fast. Some of it were words, unusual words, with characters she had never seen before. But it was also strange mathematical quadratic equations. Desme was in top set of math at school, was way above her peers. In fact, she was in an A-level online maths group. Loved it. Troy couldn't understand maths. It bored him stiff. He knew he would only just scrape through his GCSE maths when the time came. So this is why Desmi was standing behind him, mouth open, watching him writing all these incredibly complicated equations, one after another, on the sheet of paper. And as soon as he had filled one up, he grabbed another and continued to fill that up. Desmi tried talking to him, asking if he felt okay. But it was if he was oblivious to her and concentrating on what he was doing. He was writing all this down as if the end of the world depended on it. Just as quickly as it started, it stopped. In front of him on the desk, there must have been 15 or 16 sheets of mathematical equations. As soon as he stopped, his eyes unglazed, and he sat there staring ahead of him, sounding slightly out of breath. At the same time, the clear blue light that had enveloped him just disappeared. Phew, that was strange, he said out loud. I sort of knew what I was doing, but something was definitely controlling me. I knew you were here, Desmi, and could hear you talking to me, but just knew I had to write all these weird things down. What is all this stuff? Is this maths? As he said this to Desmi, she didn't say anything, just nodded her head up and down vigorously and said, Well, I think so, Troy. Troy burst out laughing. Now this was funny. His worst ever subject, and now writing down equations like a world-famous professor of mathematics. Desmi had already numbered and collected the pieces of A4 paper together and began pinning them onto an old cork board that was on one of the walls of Troy's bedroom. She stood there, hands on hips, eyes following the lines of complex equations, trying to make some sense of it all. Troy noticed she was shaking her head. He had never seen Desmi so lost for words as she was now. They suddenly heard a noise. It wasn't loud. A sound that sounded like someone was pushing a box along a floor. Interspersed with that noise were other noises like squeaks, blips, and pops. Nesbit was stood up on the bed now, looking intently into Troy's walk-in wardrobe and growling under his breath. Troy and Desmi tentatively came across the bedroom and looked into his large wardrobe. Both of them could see that the box had definitely moved, at least from the back of Troy's wardrobe towards the entrance. For a few moments, it was deathly quiet. They noticed the electric flashes starting to move and pick up speed. There was a slurping sound, a sound very similar to someone sucking up a very long string of spaghetti into their mouth. It was all picking up speed now, and with it came a bright light and a white mist. Faster and faster, the flashes were moving around inside the see-through box. The box started to vibrate and lift just off the floor, and it started to revolve faster and faster. Troy and Desmi were slowly backing away as this whole process was picking up speed, when suddenly it stopped. The box settled back onto the floor. There was no movement, no noise. The lid of the box started to lift upward slowly, and a mist was seeping out from inside the box, falling to the floor and moving outwards. The mist then slowly began to dissipate. As the mist was going, something was revealing itself inside the mist within the box. Whatever it was moving around. They caught glimpses of possibly body parts. Another sound began, this time a sucking sound, a little like a hoover makes. Troy and Esme could swear the mist was being sucked in by whatever was in the middle of the mist. It was like wiping a steamed up pane of glass with a cloth. As the mist was sucked up, in its place was revealed the strangest looking alien creature. It was only tiny, maybe 1.5 feet tall, very large, appealing eyes. It had little, spindly arms and legs. Its feet were just 2 big toes, and its hands just a finger and opposing thumb. It didn't appear to have a nose as such, or a mouth for that matter, although there was a little line running across its face where a mouth would be. Generally, its skin was very similar to a lizard. It was light yellow basically, but when the light caught the scales of the skin, light was refracted off to produce a myriad of little rainbows. There was a tuft of blonde hair sprouting out on the top of its head, giving it a very comical look. Just as Troy, Desme, and Nesbit were stock still, so was the little creature, except for its eyes. They were very large indeed. First of all, it seems they could move independently of one another, similar to a chameleon, but not only that, they could protrude on stalks to about 6 inches in front of its face. One eye was carefully examining Troy on the left, and the other eye examining Desme on the right. Then each eye came together and started to concentrate on Nesbit, still standing on Troy's bed. As the eyes were doing this, Nesbit could stand it no longer and barked at the top of his voice. This made Troy and Desme jump in the air, and they scrambled backward. The little alien let out a high-pitched scream and scuttled back into the wardrobe. And at the same time, from nowhere it seems, a blue light came back and wrapped itself around the alien in a protective way and lifted him into the box. While Troy and Esme were looking at each other and trying to come to terms with what had happened, Nesbit was on the bed, wagging his tail and looking very pleased with himself. Troy glared at Nesbit. Nesbit lay down on the bed and put his paws over his head. Desme said, "Aw, it wasn't Nesbit's fault, Troy. He was just protecting us." Troy sighed and went over and ruffled Nesbit's head. Nesbit immediately stood up, panting and wagging his tail. They all looked over to the box and noticed that there was still a little gap at the top of the box so they could see inside. And they could also see the little creature. Its eyes were all over the place, looking intently at them. While this was happening, Troy inched closer to the box and sat in front of it. He turned to Desme and said, "Maybe we should try talking to it. I don't think it wants to harm us." He looked at the box and continued speaking. "Hi, My name is Troy. What's yours? Nothing. No response. Troy tried again. Do you come in peace? What is your purpose for being here? Can I help you? Again, deathly silence. The little alien was still looking at Troy and Desme. Desme went over and sat next to Troy, while Troy tried again to get the alien to speak to him. Where have you come from? Why is my head full of maths equations? Say or do something. Again, nothing. Troy turned to Desme and shrugged his shoulders. This was going nowhere. Troy was beginning to think he should have left the box where it was, when all of a sudden there was a sound like an old transistor radio trying to find a radio station. Back and forth it went. They could hear snippets of human voices, singing, thunder, storms, lightning, drumming, airplanes, and snatches of all sorts of languages, waterfalls, racing cars, music, horses galloping, etc. Then, out of the blue, came this very deep and excruciatingly loud computer-generated voice, which said, "Hi, me friend, hello!" The alien must have noticed that it was hurting the human's ears, so he stopped. There was more of the radio station searching noises. Then it said, "Better, me think?" Troy and Desme couldn't help it, but found themselves nodding. The voice was a lot softer, not computer sounding, but similar to a very old person's voice. It was a little shaky, but was certainly being understood. "Oh, gooding. Yips. Hey, hey. Question is of you answering now? Now? Okays. Need help. Very much now. Now. Things bad trying to get me. Had to escape. Now, here on planet. Hide me? Please? Please?" As this conversation was continuing, the little alien appeared in front of them on the floor. It was sat on its haunches. Nesbit was watching intently from the safety of Troy's bed and keeping very quiet. It was a little unnerving watching the alien's eyes moving around on stalks independently of one another. Every so often, its skin changed, not only color, but also texture. Troy couldn't figure out why until he spotted what it was the alien was looking at around his room. He had a shiny red Lamborghini model racing car. So when the alien noticed this, its body became red and shiny. And when it looked at a large poster of a T-Rex on another wall, its body became green and scaly. Not just that, but where before there was this thin little line where its mouth was, suddenly there was a jaw full of sharp dinosaur teeth. They looked abnormally large in proportion to the size of the rest of his body. So this made Desme and Troy laugh out loud. Immediately, the teeth changed from dinosaur teeth to big smiles, again way too large in proportion to the size of its body. So Troy and Desme continued to laugh. "This good sound you make? Ha, ha, sound is pleasant sound, no? Evil creatures coming soon. Need help? Please help me? Very please?" There was silence. Both eyes of the alien had come together. Then extended as far out as they could and were concentrated in looking into Troy's eyes. Troy glanced over to Desme, who was at his side, and she slowly nodded. So Troy looked back and said to the alien, "Yes, we can help, but we need lots more information. Who are these bad creatures? Where are you from? Why is my head full of all this maths?" "Jolly good! Yipsy-doo! Okay, I have information you need. Here I goes. I from up there." The alien pointed with its right finger to Troy's large bedroom window. One half of the window was open, and the moon was there, looking large and bright. "I live on Mooney. All my family live on Mooney. We keep Mooney clean and bright. Sometimes we clean parts of Mooney, so is why you think some of it looks dark sometimes. We cleaning it, right?" Troy and Desme were slowly nodding, concentrating on the alien's every word. "Without me and families, Mooney would be black. Very horrible. We use special magic to keep Mooney nice and brightly. Special magic crystals. Baddies come and steal the crystals. Baddies called dammers. They want crystals. They very valuable. They do not ever ask nicely. They hurt us badly. Now they are back to steal more crystals from my home planet." The alien continued, "I am leader of my colony. We live inside the Mooney. My name is very long, too long for you to remember. It is Palmatheon Astroconnectiva Ultrablaster Pangrol III, but you humans can call me Pangy." Nesbit, Troy, and Desme were fascinated with everything Pangy was saying. Desme then said, "And so why is Troy's head full of all that complicated math?" "Ah, goody question, human lady. You see, it is navigation map references to our home world, which is far, very from here. It called Pally-tilly-mally-me, in your thinking, 11 light years. We moved references from all my family's minds. We chose you, human man, to put coordinates into your head to confuse the dammers. They want the coordinates to go to our home world and steal all crystals. They never think of looking in a human head. So we know map coordinates are safe for now." It was all starting to make a little sense to Troy and Desme. "So we need to hide from the dammers before they can get hands on coordinates. But dammers are very clever. Won't take long for them to figure out you human have map coordinates. So you can help me to confuse the dammers. Give them run around. Then they get bored and leave us alone." "Okay, and once the dammers are back where they belong, what happens to the map coordinates I have in my head?" "Oh, simples. We remove them, go to our home world, bring back some more crystals for the moon, and life as you know it goes on as before. But, of course, in taking coordinates out of your head, you will die a terrible death, of course." When Pangy said this, the color drained out of Troy's face. Desme put her hands up to cradle her face, and even Nesbit cocked his head on one side, when suddenly From Pengy came the sound of laughter, hearty laughter. Ho, ho, ha, ha. Only joking human. He, so funny. I joke like a human, yes? Your face very, very funny. No, you will be just fine, and you will get highest honor medal for helping us. But you must hide me, please, not only from Dammers, who will be looking for me, but from humans as well. That is why we picked you, human, for coordinates. We can trust you. Most humans will never understand. We know how humans react to strange things. You like to shoot with guns first, then ask questions after. Am I right? Human? Am I? Troy had to admit it did sound about right. Suddenly, from the very bottom stairs, Troy's mom shouted up. Right, guys, I think it is time for bed. Desmi dear, if you are staying, don't forget to let your dad know, please. Don't want him wondering where you are. Oh, and ask him about dinner tomorrow. Troy jumped up and shouted down the stairs. Got it, Mom. Desmi is staying. See you in the morning. To which Glynis said, Okay, night you too. Troy went back into the bedroom. They decided they both needed to sleep. They moved Pengy in his box further into Troy's wardrobe. They had to explain to him that humans have to sleep at night, which Pengy felt was very odd since he and others like him didn't need to. Pengy seemed to settle down. His eyes shrunk back into his head. He slipped back into the box. Desmi kissed Troy on his cheek and disappeared to her room, one floor beneath. Troy had a quick shower and collapsed into bed and thought about everything that had happened this evening. He couldn't quite believe it. It was exciting, but he was tired. He slipped into his bed, his eyes started to close, and he went out like a light. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for Chapter 5. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In the description below, I've included links for me to find and purchase this book.